Hello, everyone. Welcome to Mindfulness Monday, October 4th. You know, when times are normal, meaning how they were before COVID-19, it's very common that many people struggle with their negative and fear-based thoughts over everyday concerns. But now, during a global pandemic, you can only imagine how difficult it is for millions of people who feel as if they have absolutely no control over their thoughts of fear, anxiety, and a constant worry of uncertainty. There's an anonymous quote that goes, "If you realized how powerful your thoughts are, you would never think a negative thought." Well, that seems almost impossible during this unprecedented time when emotions are running extremely high and people are feeling overwhelmed by so many of their negative and fear-based thoughts. What is possible is learning how to manage and navigate our thoughts better, especially those negative and fear-based thoughts. And that's why I created the Says Who method based on my book, which is a user-friendly questioning method for challenging our negative and fear-based thoughts. I also created an online certification program for becoming a thought coach. As a life coach for over 10 years, I realized that what I was essentially doing was helping people overcome the type of negative and fear-based thoughts that get in the way of their happiness, goals, success, empowerment, autonomy, even personal freedom. I switched my work from a life coach to a thought coach and never looked back. And I actually say now that I feel a thought coach is the new life coach. So some of you listening might want to know more about what a thought coach actually does more in depth. And that brings me to my two very special guests today. These two gentlemen are not only two of my top graduates, but they both have become important facilitators for the Thought Coach Certification Program in areas that they are extremely versed in and have lived through themselves successfully. Let me tell you a little bit about both of them. Johnnie Calloway has written 3 books, Dragons to Butterflies, The Bridge, and Taming the Dragon. Johnnie hosts the podcast Morph into a New You, which I have been on, where he focuses on the power of and the importance of thought management. Johnnie is a certified thought coach and thought coach trainer. He has over 30 years of 12-step recovery and over 30 years of A Course in Miracles training. Using the spiritual principles of these two powerful pathways, he has learned to navigate through his own personal adversities, living with a substance abuse disorder, PTSD, bipolar disorder, clinical depression, and being an abused child, to living with a reasonable peace of mind. Johnnie has now devoted his life to helping others navigate the turbulent waters of mental health and find their own peace of mind by teaching them how to manage their own thoughts. My other guest today, Jason Holzer, is a certified teacher and also a thought coach, accomplished basketball coach, and elite skills trainer. He's an Amazon best-selling author of Shattered by Suicide, Renewed by Resilience, How to Move Forward After Being Left Behind, and is a transformational storyteller, speaker. His dedication to positivity impacting the lives of those around him inspired the hashtag Act to Impact, which serves as a reminder that we all can make a difference. He is a Missouri State alum with a master's in sports management and is also dedicated to being a loving husband and father. He strives to help others overcome the lasting effects of losing a loved one to suicide. He's currently on the board for the USSI, United Suicide Survivors International, alongside world-renowned entrepreneur and innovator in social change and suicide prevention, Dr. Sally Spencer Thomas. Along with others around the world, they are raising awareness that suicide doesn't stop life from getting worse. It eliminates it from ever getting better. Welcome to Mindfulness Monday, Johnnie and Jason.
Thanks for having me, Ora.
So great to have you both here today. What a treat.
I know I'm really grateful to be here. I'm kind of excited about where we go from here.
Well, there is so much that I want to share with the audience about who you both are, the incredible work that you guys do, and how you're making such an important difference out in the world. So let me start with you, Johnnie, because you and I met before Jason and I did. And interestingly enough, Jason became a thought coach because of you. So all three of us have a special connection, but I want to start with how our connection, Johnnie, was based in something that we both felt so strongly about, and we established that very early on when we connected, and that's changing your life by changing your thoughts, which we went into deeply on the podcast we did together, Says Who for the Addictive Personality. So Johnnie, tell our listeners a little bit about why changing our thoughts is so important for you and how that's impacted your life.
Well, okay, I love this whole process, by the way. My personal experience is because of my 12-step recovery and the importance of taking a personal inventory. Early on in my turnaround, so to speak, I learned the importance of changing my behavior. And then at some point I realized, you can't really change your behavior without changing the way you think about a situation. Because a behavior doesn't just happen, it's driven by a thought. So that drove me to investigating my thoughts and paying attention to my thoughts. And with over 30 years of 12-step recovery, as you mentioned, and 30 years of A Course in Miracles, and all kinds of healing work, what I've come to realize is like, all I ever really did as far as my healing goes was change the way I thought about a particular situation. And Course in Miracles is all about that, by the way. And so I remember the first time you and I spoke when we were getting ready to do our first podcast together, about 20 minutes into our conversation, we said, we should have been recording that because it became so animated. And so it was like I was talking to an old friend because we were definitely speaking the same language. So that was my introduction. That's why I believe in it. All of my healing, which has been immense, has been driven by thought coaching, even though I didn't know what it was.
Right. Yeah. The power of changing those thoughts, boy. Jason, you had a very traumatic experience by losing your father to suicide. Tell our listeners why overcoming the type of thoughts you had to in order to get on the other side of trauma changed your life and gave you a reason to, as you say in the subtitle of your book, move forward after being left behind. Talk to our listeners a little bit about that.
Yeah, I was 17 whenever I lost my dad to suicide, and at that age, it's tough to really understand like what it is to be almost trying to be an adult, what they consider you as an adult at 18. And I was just really trying to figure out who am I after losing my dad to this suicidal situation. And I remember these feelings of feeling doubt, shame, lack of self-worth, lack of self-confidence, even overwhelmed by the emotions going on in my head and my body, because I didn't know how to handle it. I didn't know how to handle loss, how to handle grief, and in that traumatic of a situation. So over time, though, there was something about me that believed there was something more, something better, that I could use what I went through and turn it into a positive. And as I kept studying and I kept those positive thoughts like, hey, life will get better eventually. I think life will get better. And I surrounded myself with people that were doing positive things as well. I think that was key too, is that I asked for mentors. I asked God for mentors. I was like, bring people in my life that are going to help me maybe not necessarily like understand what I'm going through, but simply just listen to me and steer me in the right direction. And that was a lot of it, early on in life, was surrounding myself with people that were willing to help and help me kind of figure out what's next for me.
It's interesting because both of you had experienced trauma. And, I want our listeners to understand that when we talk about changing thoughts, and I know, Johnnie, we say that line, change your thoughts, change your life, and I want people to understand that they may think, well, it's not so easy to change your thoughts, and they might even not even begin the process because they don't believe it's possible, especially when you endure difficulty and suffering and trauma, that you're going to be able to change those thoughts around it. Now, I want our listeners to know and to understand, and we'll get into thought coaching in a minute, that this is a process, and I talk about it even with the work that I do, as far as my mindfulness work and having created the Says Who method, that we think between 40 and 70,000 thoughts a day. And a lot of those thoughts can be not positive, they don't serve our well-being. So I want our listeners to understand from both of your perspectives that those thoughts are going to come up. We're going to have those moments where we're going to get a thought that's going to come up and it's going to not feel very good. And it might be a thought from the past. And it might be a thought related to the traumas that both of you respectively have experienced. So that I want to start with you, Johnnie, because you and I have talked about this. We talked about this just recently, when you can have like a gnarly day. You can have a thought that comes up and you're like, oh man, this is a doozy, so that we know what that looks like. We know how to navigate that. We know how to process it. We know how to move through it because of the work that we've done. Both you, Johnnie, and Jason know what that looks like. So from your perspective, Johnnie, talk a little bit about that. Like, what does that look like for you? That, you know the work that you need to do. You know what it means to change those negative and fear-based and undermining, sabotaging thoughts. But when they come up today, what does a day in Johnnie's life look like?
Well, first, something I want to clarify is there's a real difference in thought coaching and thought management. Thought management is what I do for myself when nobody's watching. And, thought coaching is what I do to help you learn how to do that same thing. So the thing for me is, I'm really grateful you brought this up, because just this week I encountered one of those gnarly nights that you're talking about. Several years ago, I had a crash with my bipolar and my PTSD, and I ended up hospitalized and doing shock treatments. And what took me there was sleep deprivation. It's what started it, and it's what maintained it throughout my process with that. So the other night, I couldn't go to sleep, and I felt the anxiety start to ramp up. And I started having all these lies to run through my head of like, oh my God, you're going to crash. Everything you thought you've done to recover from this was all bull. And you're going to go back to the same place because all this stuff you think you've been doing to help it really didn't work. And the more I thought those thoughts, the more anxious I became, the more my heart raced, and the more impossible sleep became. So I did one of the tools that I always do. I got up and I wrote myself a letter to me from God. And in that process, I realized that I was letting the dark side of my mind take over. So I because I do this thought management, I'm like, okay, wait a minute. I have control over these thoughts. They don't have control over me. So now that I just need to change the way I'm thinking about this. And I decided in that process that I was going to see this as like a barometer to say, okay, you need to take a look at what's going on. And I did. And I went back to bed and I went right to sleep. But they do still come up. Thought management is a lifelong process. I heard you say in one of your interviews one time that I was able to listen to. You said this is not drive-through recovery. This is not a one and done kind of thing. It's something I have to do every day. And especially being somebody with bipolar and PTSD, if I don't get a hold of those thoughts right away, as soon as I possibly can. They can take me down into that darkness before I'm even aware. And so, but if I can and I do catch them, I don't have to go to that dark place. And I haven't been to that dark place in over 8 years. So
that is so true, Johnny. And that really, gives people a sense of what it means to be struck by these negative thoughts that come up that can just pull you down like that. Before you know it, there you go spiraling down. And so knowing what to look for, knowing how to catch it, I always say, be aware of those thoughts, and I mean not just the pretty ones, but the ones that are really going to try and pull you down, So when you start to do this work, and you're right, it's not a drive-by, it's not a quick fix, it's not anything that we think we can just sort of like, phone in. This is work. And I want people to understand this by the time our interview is over, that the commitment that you make to it, meaning the commitment you make to really managing your thoughts, working with your thoughts, transforming your thoughts, is really a game changer, but it's going to take that work, and it's going to take that commitment. So I want people to understand that none of us are going to be talking about that this is a quick fix. How about you, Jason? Tell us what that looks like for you, that having really worked through a traumatic experience, having lost your father, we know that those thoughts can revisit us again. It's just part of human nature. How do you manage a thought when it comes up for you that you feel you're maybe struggling with a bit? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, I like to use visuals a lot. They kind of helps me like with life. And one of the things that I've been using recently is kind of seeing thoughts as clouds in the sky. And like the sun always comes out. There's going to be times where it's going to storm. There's going to be times where it's going to be cloudy outside, and maybe you're not going to have, because not every day is ice cream and bunnies. You're going to have tough days where things are going to challenge you. And so for me, it's okay, I know life will get better, and I know this is a situation that's challenging me, and being more aware of my thoughts, like what's going on inside of my head. What am I thinking? What is happening right now that's making me almost, trigger these negative thoughts? And whenever you can pinpoint them and you can almost, just call them out, for example, they kind of dissipate because you learn not to get emotionally involved with them, because how you're feeling, I almost use kind of how I'm feeling kind of, and then taking the feeling and going up to, okay, what are the thoughts in my head that are causing this feeling? And so then using my willpower as well, I can choose to think different thoughts. I can choose to get emotionally involved in different things, because negative thoughts are going to pass through your head, but if you let them stick, that's when you kind of get even more of a spiraling loop. If you allow them to have power, if you allow them to just move on, like, oh, okay, I recognize you, but I'm going to let you go on through it. I'm going to choose to implant a positive thought right behind it and get emotionally involved in that. So that's kind of how I've been using that, battling those negative thoughts, battling those, limiting beliefs, if you will, and transforming them into thoughts that what's the exact opposite of that, and getting more involved with that.
Yeah, I love that quote by, I think, the Greek philosopher Heraclitus: the only constant in life is change. So nothing stays permanent. And also the way you describe the clouds, as a mindfulness and meditation teacher, that's one of the things that we learn in meditation, that thoughts are going to come in. And a lot of the times people feel in meditation, I got to stop those thoughts. Oh my God, my mind, I got to stop those thoughts. No, you got to observe the thoughts. And if you look at the analogy that you just gave, that they're like clouds moving across the sky, they never stay in the same place. Clouds are always moving, and so are our thoughts. And I also like to say, our thoughts don't hold on to us, we hold on to them. So I think the ways in which you both are describing how we work with these thoughts of ours, how we navigate the choppy waters, because I also like to use the analogy of the ocean. Sometimes the waters are very tumultuous and very choppy, and sometimes the sea is calm. So we need to have these skill sets that we recognize are so important to move through the difficulty. Johnnie, tell us a defining moment for you when you knew that you had to change your thoughts. You had to change the way you think, basically. A defining moment, if you will, on your journey, that you just you had that aha moment where you went, you know what? This is it. This is the time where I'm going to have to really change it up. Can you share a personal story with us around that?
Yeah, easily. My first introduction to that was the night I went to my first 12-step meeting. And that was the first night that I can ever really tell you that I had hope. And when I left that meeting, I was full of hope, and I was blessed with this one awareness. That was in the 12 steps, we call it the moment of clarity. And my moment of clarity presented itself to me as, look, dude, your way ain't working. Because the way I approached any part of life was carrying me to darkness. So with that hope came an open-mindedness to being taught. And the thing about being taught that is really important, first I got to know that I don't know, or you can't teach me. So in that moment of clarity, I knew I didn't know what I needed to do. So it made it possible for me to listen to somebody else and their experiences. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah, it does. You know, I want to go into a little bit the area, because something that I think that we all recognize is that we have the power to change our thoughts. And for a lot of people out there, they don't know what that looks like. They don't know what that feels like. They feel that their thoughts take them over, literally. And I always, try to say that there isn't a separation between your mind and yourself. You are, as I say and says who, you're in the driver's seat. Your mind isn't in the driver's seat. You're the one that's really controlling the thoughts that you have. So, for a lot of people out there, when they get taken over or gripped by a negative or fear-based thought, they feel so taken over by it, they don't know what to do. And Jason, you said earlier, the whole idea of when we get taken over by an emotion, I say that behind every emotion, there's a thought. You just got to find it. Not everybody knows what the thought, they are not able to connect the dots. And you both know through thought coaching what that looks like. So, why don't you share a little bit about your take? I mean, you both told the audience what your sort of, go-to protocol looks like when you get taken over. But people out there that feel as though they can't separate those thoughts from themselves, what advice would you give to them? Let's start with you, Jason, and what that might look like for someone that goes, well, I don't know how to do that. Like, what does that mean? How do I suddenly feel like I'm in control of a thought that feels like it's just so taken me over?
Yeah, I think, with your says who method, it's asking yourself the right questions. It's pinpointing that thought. Where did that thought originate from? Because, you mentioned we have 40 to 70,000 thoughts a day. Well, 90% of those thoughts are repeated from the day before. And a negative thought is 40 to 70 times more powerful than a positive one. So if you can pinpoint that thought and where it came from, which more than likely it came from somewhere else, TV program, your parents, a traumatic situation, something somebody told you that you believed. If you can isolate that thought and realize like, oh, that didn't really come from me, that was somebody else's thought, I can originate my own. And with your, like the power of your says who questions, like, hey, who says that? Do I like this thought? Does this thought working for me? And, the other four that we mentioned that you talked about through your thought coaching program, you're really given a guide to isolate those thoughts and detach that emotion, because you then realize like, I don't want to think this, but now I know why I'm thinking it based off of what I've been told or what I've read or seen or heard that I didn't even think about. I didn't have the gatekeeper up in my mind, and it just went on through my emotions. So I think that's what I loved about your thought coaching program was it gave me a tool to find those thoughts and rip them out like a weed out of a garden. So I have space to put them in a positive place.
What's interesting about what you're saying is that it's the whole notion of questioning our thoughts. People don't even think they can do that. And when they're presented with that, idea, if you will, they're like, wow, I never thought to question that thought. It's so foreign for people. And I used to say, if someone walked up to you and started saying a bunch of terrible things to you, what are you going to just stand there and accept it? But if we say terrible things to ourselves, we're like, oh, hey, yeah, I'm cool. I can just keep on telling myself what a horrible person I am and accept it. So the whole idea which is what the Says Who method is based on, is the inquiry. It's the questioning. It's the challenging. Like, no, I actually don't have to believe this thought, you know? Yeah. And imagine how many people out there, which is why it's so great for them to hear from you guys today, is the whole concept, if you will, of like, wow, I can actually question my thoughts. Mm-hmm. Wouldn't you agree, Johnny? It's like the whole idea of that, like, wait a minute, I have something to say here. I have the ability to question my thoughts.
First, I want to say I love everything Jason just said. Everything he just said kind of pinpointed the whole thing for me. And one of the things about the questioning that's important to me is I ask people frequently, do you ever think about what you think? Because if you would think about what you think, you would see this is taking you nowhere.
For sure.
Because so many of us, I know, you know, my quote unquote specialty, I would say, in thought coaching is for the addictive personality and for people with bipolar and PTSD. But an addict new to their recovery, if they have a thought about using, they think that means they want to use. And then they get terrified and it gets magnified. So the next thing you know, they're using. So I use this analogy for that. If you rode a bicycle to work every day for 30 years, and then you got a car, periodically when you wake up in the morning, you're going to think about that bicycle. That doesn't mean you got to get on it and ride it to work. It just means our thoughts become like grooves in a record. And so if I can ask myself, do I really want to pick up? Do I really want to go back to that hellhole? No, I don't. But when we don't realize that we can change the thought because we don't ask the question, I think my job as a thought coach, your answers are none of my business. My job is to help you ask the right questions. We all have our own unique answers. And if I'm guiding you to your answers, chances are I'm trying to guide you to have the same answers that I had. And they may not be the answers for you. But in learning to ask my question that I need to ask, and then allowing my inner teacher to tell me what my individual answer is, I am empowered. And to me, that's the goal of all of this, is to realize we are empowered, we are free, and we are the author of our own life.
Absolutely. You know, it's interesting because of the Says Who method being 7 questions that really, you know, I've seen people just stop in their tracks when I've asked them those questions because it short circuits the automatic thinking. Do you know, if you ask somebody a question like simply, which is one of my favorite Says Who questions, do you like that thought? Or, you know, how is that thought working for you? And I've literally had people look at me like a deer in headlights because we're so on automatic and we're so caught up in the narrative that we keep telling ourselves that until you really hold that mirror up, which is really what a thought coach can do, is to just allow those questions to be asked so that somebody can really sit with that and be with the thoughts that they keep telling themselves, that they're on automatic and that those thoughts have not served their well-being in any way, shape, or form. So let's talk a little bit about thought coaching, you guys, because you are 2 of my top thought coaches and now facilitators. And I want the listeners to know what that looks like as far as you deciding to be thought coaches. So I'd like to hear from both of you why you made that decision and how you have become my 2 facilitators in the areas that you feel you really are versed in. So Jason, let's begin with you on that one as far as what does being a thought coach mean to you? Why did you choose to be a thought coach? And then when you had the opportunity to be a facilitator, talk to people about why you really thought that you could be best serving others in that area of facilitation.
Yeah, I met, so I learned about thought coaching actually through Johnnie. It was a Zoom call through a group called Guts, Grit, and Grind. It was with Tyler Spencer Thomas, and he said, "Yeah, I'm a certified thought coach," and immediately, like, it resonated with me. Like, I only do things that I feel a connection with subconsciously. And when he said I'm a thought coach, I was like, I went and I saw Johnny. I was like, what is that? What does that mean? Because I don't know what it is exactly, but it made sense to me. Because I've been a basketball coach for 11 years. Like coaching is something I naturally have been doing. And, I was like, that's something that I need to do because of with suicide, and suicide is a very thought-based, illness with mental illness. And I was like, that is something that I think can make a really big difference with what I'm doing already with suicide prevention. And with sports as well, with athlete, and a lot of times our confidence level is based off of how we're thinking. So that was a lot of the reason why I felt the call to becoming a thought coach. And then being a facilitator, I was like, if I can help other people teach this material and understand it better, then that's more quality people we have coaching other people on their thoughts. That's more people that are thinking better. Because, you and I both know it's going to take more than just us three to, and the rest of your graduates to get people thinking in a better situation, to coach them on their thoughts. So as a facilitator, I felt, that it made sense being a teacher myself, that I can really guide people through your thought coaching course and give them a good foundation for when they go out and become thought coaches themselves.
I want to mention, Jason, because I think it's really important, especially in the area of what you experienced with the loss of your father, and that is about suicide prevention and how maybe your work with helping people understand their thoughts better can actually address something like suicidal ideation. And I want to define that for people, because when I learned more about that, it was very powerful for me to understand where thoughts can really take somebody over to the point where they can actually end their lives, which is very tragic. And for those that might not know what that term means, those are thoughts about self-harm with deliberate consideration or planning of possible techniques of causing one's own death. Now, I know this is a very complex issue around suicide, but I really do want to bring to the foreground of it something like suicidal ideation about thoughts, where, when we look at all of these areas, in the area of suicide, in the area of addiction, and I'm going to talk about that with you, Johnnie, in a minute, these are really serious areas that afflict millions of people in the world, okay? And for anybody that's listening to this today, that might need to hear this, because, you might not be somebody that is thinking about sticking a needle in your arm, or might not be somebody who wants to end your life today, but everybody has had those, dark thoughts, if you will. And what we want to really share with people today is how far they can go, and that why the importance of working with our thoughts is so key. And that we have to really understand how far it can go. Johnnie, you mentioned really going towards the darkness. The darkness can take you over very easily. We're in unprecedented times right now. A lot of people are suffering. They're afraid, they're scared. They don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. So I also want us to join our wisdom together today to talk about helping people. Because Johnnie, in the area of addiction, Jason, in the area of suicide, there are a lot of people there's predictions that in both of those areas we're going to see a tremendous increase because of what's going on right now. So let's start with you, Johnnie, on this. As far as in the area of addiction, where now is the time? I just literally read this morning very startling fact that nurses and caregivers, if you will, they're discovering that there are opioids that are being stolen out of hospitals because these first responders, caregivers, nurses, they are so stressed out that not only do others maybe need the help, they're self-medicating because they don't know what to do. These are serious times, and I don't want to make light of it, So I want both of your input today in how you feel you can help through your wisdom, having experienced what you've experienced through the areas of addiction and suicide, advice that you can give to people. So Johnnie, let's start with you.
With addiction, one of the things that is so important to me is that I've realized I do have more power over my addiction than I had previously thought. I thought I was powerless, and that I would never be able to change it. And what has happened and what I've learned is our healing process gives us the power that we otherwise did not have. And like with the 12 steps, they do that. We do that through the 12-step work. But it's available to us in so many other ways also. And it's my thing is like connect with someone, and then to walk them through the fear of that, because most people that are isolated and alone, they're isolated and alone because they're afraid of connection. They're afraid of people. They're afraid of trusting someone. They're afraid of opening up. So if I can help them see that they don't have to be terrified of talking to someone, connection is vital. And by talking about our thoughts and learning that other people are thinking the same thing, that connection gives us more strength. And so what I try to help people with, especially people that are new to their recovery from whatever their addiction is like, okay, let's see who you can connect with. Let's see if we can walk you through this fear of letting somebody else know you. Because there's some story going on in there that says people are not to be trusted. And it is difficult, especially when you've surrounded yourself with other addicts that truly can't be trusted. Other active addicts, I should say. So it's about helping them to acquire the courage to step out and try something new, which you can't do something new without thinking something new.
Right. And also, this is a time to ask for help. If ever there was a time to reach out and connect and ask for help, it's now. Jason, what about you? What would you say to somebody that's going, maybe thinking to themselves, wow, boy, this life, this is a tough one, and I'm really struggling with, my purpose and what this life means, and it seems rather dark and depressing. What words of encouragement and wisdom could you give to them?
Yeah, only thing is like for myself and how I got in this space was I reflected back on my life and what I've experienced upon this point. And one thing was like, what do I love to do? And I've always loved playing sports. I always loved being involved in sports. And what was my most painful moments? Well, my most painful moment was losing my dad to suicide. And so I was like, how can I take these two things and make them my purpose, make them my passion? Because sometimes your past gives you a little bit of a breadcrumb on what's in your future. Like turning those pain points, turning those highs, those joys, and then making them your purpose, your passion, your drive, if you will. And what you'll find is that you'll find when you start to walk in those steps and you walk in those spaces of solving a big problem or of connecting with something that you just do naturally, things start to turn in your favor. And that's kind of what happened to me. Like, thought coaching came into my life after losing my dad to suicide, which is he lost his life because he lost his thoughts. And now I'm working on coaching people through their thoughts. I came up with me and another colleague with 40 athletes where we're teaching life skills through sports. And we're coaching 12 to 18-year-olds to change a generation for that. And then it goes back to, again, those questions asking. I ask myself empowering why questions every day. And what I mean by that is I ask myself, like, why do I have authentic and genuine relationships? Why am I a great husband? Why am I a great father to my kids? Why am I a great family member? Why does life come easily to me? Why do things come easily to me? Because your brain is an answer-seeking mechanism. Your mind, and it's looking for answers. So when you ask yourself, again, the right questions, you're going to get more answers that are going to be more exciting and more, involved in what you really want to happen as opposed to what you don't want to happen.
Right, exactly. Johnnie, let's talk a little bit about breakthroughs in addiction, speaking of addiction, and how you see it changing in the future as far as working more closely with the type of thoughts people have, we've talked about that affects or perpetuates addictive behavior. What would you like to see different moving forward in the area of addiction? Now that you're a thought coach, what do you think is the missing piece in that? I know you're a big supporter of the 12-step recovery movement, but I know that you have your own thoughts around that. So now that you are functioning as a thought coach, What do you think you can add to that, if you will?
The beauty of what you created with your hit says who method to me is it works, and that it takes us to the, in A Course in Miracles, it says a teacher of God's purpose is to collapse time. And so it took me a long time to get where I am with this thought thing and my addiction. So now what I do when I work with somebody in the 12 steps is I try to go immediately in the inventory taking process, which happens in 2 of the 12 steps, to like, okay, this is what you were doing that was causing you all this trouble. Let's see about what you were thinking that was driving you to what you were doing. Because another thing I'm going to quote Jason on that he said in one of our early conversations, if you change the behavior and you don't change the thought that drives the behavior, it's like pulling a weed and not getting the root. So it's very important to get the thought, because what I've watched over the years for many, many times, myself included, is somebody gets all focused on changing their behavior, but then they end up doing the same thing just in a different way. But if we can change the thought that promoted and produced that behavior, then we don't have to behave that way in different ways, for lack of a better way of saying it. So my hope with what I can do for people in addiction is to help them change the thoughts that drive them to think they need to drink or drug in the first place.
Which I think is really, speaking of roots, that is the root of the problem. You know, it's like catching the thought before you get into the behavior, which creates the action, which creates the reality. These are the connecting of the dots of the importance of knowing why we think what we think and what the outcome of those thoughts can be. So I think you're so right about that, Johnnie, is that, you know, again, helping the addict understand the thought that drives the action is so key. Do you know? Really, really is.
We love to think that we're powerless over our thoughts and that we're actually victims to our thoughts. And until we take that power back over that thought process, we are powerless until we take the power.
Right.
But the power is there to be taken.
Absolutely. Jason, let's talk a little bit about, I know you coach and you coach kids and you've coached them with sports, and, you know, starting this at such a rudimentary level, you know, an entry point, if you will, for kids to really get these skill sets, you know, to understand how to work with their thoughts, you know. Talk to us about what that looks like for you as far as you do work with kids. I mean, you have kids of your own, and why it's so important. I feel that way about mindfulness, teaching mindfulness at schools, at the earliest, the earlier, the better. Do you know, the more we teach children these life skills, if you will, is going to save them a lot of pain and suffering down the road as they enter into adulthood. So talk to us about you coaching kids and how you can implement these skill sets, if you will, for these young adults.
Well, you know, a lot of times too, it's like kind of going back to what Johnnie said, is we're trying to change the behaviors. And in school, we're trying to change behaviors constantly. But if we can get them thinking and teaching them how to think in a certain way, they'll change their behaviors on their own, and they'll feel more ownership of their behaviors, and they're going to be more excited for themselves. It's going to raise enthusiasm, raise self-esteem, raise self-confidence. So for me, it's like, hey, I walk them backwards. I'm like, hey, let me ask you something. Do you like the results that you're getting? And if it's a kid that's struggling or something, he'll probably say, no, I don't. Okay, let's go back. Do you like how you're feeling? Well, not really. I'm not really feeling that great. Okay, now, based off of the results you're getting, based off of the actions you're taking, based off of what you're feeling, what are you thinking right now? Well, you know, I'm tired, or I didn't sleep very well, or my parents got in an argument, or you name it. I was like, okay, what do you want to think? Like, well, I want to think good thought. I want to think about thoughts of my friends, or like, having fun. Okay. Then whenever they give me that, like, just nugget, I'm like, boom, that's what we need to focus on. Now, how do you feel? And it's almost like a light bulb goes off. Like, oh, I get it. And so again, it's like you said, the earlier we teach them, the more we mold their mind, if you will, to understand where their thoughts are coming from and how they can originate their own thoughts to get involved with. it's just going to help them as they get older.
Absolutely. I mean, so many of the beliefs that we have, which are oftentimes our core beliefs, really were developed or determined or defined in childhood, and they're carried into adulthood. Do you know? When we really look at some of the thoughts that people hold on as adults, and when I work with my clients to really find out, which is, the second of the says who question, have I heard someone say this thought before? It's just unbelievable how many adults reveal that the thought that they hold as true and real was something that they carried over from childhood about themselves. And it wasn't until something was happening to them that was causing them deep unhappiness or depression, or, what I like to say is the side effect or the symptom of a thought gone unattended to, if you will. That's why I believe this work is so incredibly important, is that there is that Buddhist term, thoughts become things, and those things can literally be depression and anxiety, and then people don't know why they're even feeling those things. So it's connecting to those thoughts. And if you could work with children early on so they don't become those young adults that carry those negative and fear-based thoughts into adulthood, and then have to kind of unpack all of those thoughts that aren't even true.
Right.
Do you know?
Yeah. And to further that point, I try to get kids to think about the consequences. Like, are you going to like what's going to happen if you choose to do this? Like, hey, you know what? You have to make your own choices, but just know that if you choose to get in a car with somebody that's been drinking alcohol, for example, you might get in a car accident. You can't be so worried about everybody liking you. You can be a likable person, but think ahead and think about the consequences. And are you going to be happy with the results of those consequences? And that gives that kind of a guide on whether or not you should get involved in something.
Right, exactly. So I see that our time is moving, as I knew it would, moving quickly. And I want to talk about thought coaching and what that means to both of you, and what you hope to see happen with your thought coaching, and how you feel that could be effective in helping people. Johnnie, let's start with you with that one. Now that you are a thought coach, you were actually my first thought coach graduate who became a facilitator. And so tell our listeners what that means to you, how you see that moving forward, and what you would like to see accomplished through being a thought coach.
Wow, so much. I mean, because it is, to me, the answer. I mean, I want to say this. Thought coaching has been around forever, but you, Ora Nadrich, put together a method that simplifies it and brings it home to us.
Thank
But
you.
we've been being taught forever about the importance of our thoughts. But you put together this very concise method that simplifies it for people, which is incredible. And what do I hope to come from it? Just like I said in the beginning about the other night when I couldn't go to sleep. Now, if I didn't know how to think about that today differently, that could have set me up for a full-blown depression that would have carried me into those suicidal ideations, and I would have felt totally powerless and a victim to my own mind. I hope to help others to not have to go to that dark place where all they can think about is how to end it. And tying this back to addicts, and addiction, what I hope is that they can learn that the way most addicts today, this has been a proven fact, the way most addicts became addicts was trying to self-medicate a trauma or being bipolar, and like, it didn't work. And we hold on to the idea that because that it worked once or twice when we first started using or drinking, that I can get it to work again. I'll be the first to say, I believe the first time I got drunk, it was because I was trying to numb the pain that I was in my daily life. And in the beginning, it worked. I felt relief. it stopped working very early on, and I continued to try to get it to work again.
At the end of the day, you got to get to those thoughts. You got to go in and you got to get to the depths of those thoughts that, again, that are causing you to do what you do, to think what you think, to create actions that are destructive, can be destructive, hurtful. I mean, the spectrum of the damage that is done by the thoughts that we tell ourselves is everything from like mildly upsetting to, oh, I'm unlovable, I'm worthless, I'm never going to do this, I'm never going to get that, to, I want to stick a needle in my arm, or I want to kill myself. We know that this is quite the range of thought possibilities that can be very harmful and very destructive. So as a thought coach, you're going to be dealing with a lot of people with a lot of different thoughts, and they're going to come to you presenting a myriad of thoughts, some of them seemingly rather harmless and innocuous, or some of them telling you some of their deep, dark thoughts. So Jason, for you, what about you as a thought coach now? What does that look like for you, and what do you hope for moving forward as a thought coach, seeing the results that you'd like to see people come to get, that aha moment that, yeah, they really can change their thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, just to be a guide for somebody to be their own thoughts and be the hero of their own journey. I think if there's a way that we can, through your, the way that you've lined things out, just give people a tool to use, like, and ask themselves, like, do I like this thought? Who told me this? And simply allow themselves to eventually get to a point where they don't need me anymore. Like, hey, Jason, thank you for what you showed me through Ora's thought coaching program. I got this now. And I was like, if anything ever comes up, let me know. It's like, it turns into like once every 6 months, or it's a check-in, just becoming like more of a relationship. Like, hey, how's it going? And for them to be able to say, you know what, thank you. I know how to handle those negative thoughts now. I know how to take ownership of my own life. I don't need to, rely on somebody else or rely on a substance or you name it, because I've got this handled now. And I can be the hero of my own journey. I think that's my goal, is to simply be a guide for people to understand that they can control their thoughts. And like I said, whenever I went through your program, I was like, it's so applicable. Like, it's just easy. Like, you just do this, then you release and you replace, then you get some action steps, and then you just get really emotionally involved in what you want to happen. So that's my goal, is to simply be a guide for people in their own thoughts.
I love the analogy of the hero's journey. I'm a big fan of Joseph Campbell, and I really do think that the journey of this life is that we are really trying to ascend heroically to come to be self-governing of ourselves. And the way in which we can be self-governing is to master the mind. So, I think that we're all on this life journey. It has tremendous challenges, and how powerful it is to think that, what you just said about someone saying to you, I know what to do. It's like you're giving them the skill sets. It's like we're passing on the gauntlet. Like, you can do this. It's like we're running this race, and we're literally passing the gauntlet to the next person, saying, you got this, you can do this, And I always sometimes think of this sort of analogy of, if you were on an island, by yourself with just your own mind, you had no drugs, you had no distractions, you didn't have anything but just you and your thinking mind. How can you work with those thoughts? It's so powerful to have that ability to know what to do, to how to really become a transformational thinker, which is really what this work is all about, is to really feel that and say, wow, I have the ability to change my thoughts, to transform my thoughts. I can be a transformational thinker. I mean, that's my vision for this work. That's what I want to see get out there, that people can really drop into the power that they have and know that we have this remarkable ability to change our thoughts. I find that to be, really something that is, what comes to mind for me is it's really connecting to the divine. Johnnie, you talk about, what is an addict really looking for? Looking to connect. Aren't we all looking for something on this journey called life? And if we could use our own thinking minds in ways that can help us really stay aligned to the truth, stay aligned to our authenticity, to be able to connect to something that's higher or greater or more powerful than ourselves, that wants nothing but the best for us. Isn't that so powerful? Do you know? We know that that is really where the true essence of our spirit lies. At least that's how I look at it. So as we are soon to end, you guys, first of all, I want to thank both of you. I'm so proud of both of you. I couldn't think of two more awesome guys to be thought coaches and to, you know, be ambassadors for what it means to really change those thoughts that are not serving one's well-being. And I trust you both implicitly that you're going to go out there with the work that you do and the books that you write and all that you do combined, all the work that you do combined, that you're going to change so many people's lives. And I couldn't think of two more really amazing men, people that I feel proud to call you thought coaches of the Says Who method. So I want to thank you for being who you are and doing the remarkable work that you're doing. And I also want people to know more about you, how they can come to know more about you or connect with you. So Johnnie, let's start with you. Tell people what you want them to know, anything else that you're working on, about your website. How can they reach you?
Well, you can reach me. You can find out about everything I'm doing at johnniecalloway.com. That's JohnnieCalloway.com. Everything's on there. All my blogs. I've recently, for the last 7 weeks now, I've been writing a blog every week for Thrive Global. Thank you, Ora. And I love doing that. And I have all kinds of other blogs on my website. I'm a podcaster. Morph into a new you. If you want to change your life, you got to change your mind about your life, is our tagline, and that's what we do here, and that's why I love thought coaching. But everything is on that website. All 3 of my books. My books are in transition right now because I just took over publishing them all myself, and I'm so excited about that. And I got a new book coming out, Taming the Dragon, and that should be out soon. They're all going into audio very soon, so pretty busy over here for somebody that's also running an air conditioning company. So
amazing, amazing, Johnnie. And Jason, what about you? Tell our listeners anything that's coming up that you want them to know about your work, how to find you, and all of that.
Yeah, my book and audio book are on Amazon and Audible. My website is 4dathletes.com, 4D as in dog.com. Where we are working on teaching life skills through sports. I'm most active probably on LinkedIn and Instagram, just with, posting different things that are coming up, engaging with people that, would like to engage with myself and the things that I'm doing. Facebook and Twitter as well. But my main place right now is social media and a 40 Athletes website. So again, Ora, I want to thank you for having me on here today. It's been really exciting and uplifting. I've been looking for like some kind of a coaching accreditation to work with people, and I never felt life coaching really fit with me. But whenever Johnnie told me about thought coaching again, I just want to reemphasize how much it just truly resonated with me and connected with what I want to do and how I can truly transform people. Because I felt like life coaching was too vague. Thought coaching gives specifics, it gives you details. And it really, that's where I feel like the transformation begins, is in those detail-oriented systems.
That's great. Thank you both. And yeah, if you're somebody who's going to be a thought coach, you are somebody who has definitely spent time with your thoughts. That's for sure. So, life coach, I don't know what area of life you've been spending time with yourself, but a thought coach, I know where you've been hanging out, and you've been hanging out with your thoughts. So thank you both again, Johnnie Calloway, Jason Holzer. You guys are awesome. And to my listeners, I want to thank you for being here with Johnnie and Jason and myself today. And until we meet again, from my heart to yours, stay safe, stay present, and stay kind.